Anxiety is something that everyone experiences at some point in their life. It's that horrible feeling of uneasiness and nervousness and all of that. Sometimes it's about specific things, or sometimes it's just sort of floating anxiety up in the air. But for some people, it's more than just an every now and then sort of thing. It's an everyday sort of thing. They go through it constantly. These people have anxiety disorders. There's several different types of anxiety disorders, ranging from generalized anxiety disorder to social anxiety to OCD, even though technically OCD isn't an anxiety disorder, it's its own thing. But nevertheless, it deals a lot with anxiety. So, yeah. But for this, I just wanted to give you guys pretty much my experience with anxiety, just so you know where I'm coming from in the rest of the videos that I'm going to make. So I've been blessed with the delightful privilege of having obsessive compulsive disorder, aka OCD. And now you're probably all wondering, so wait, that pretty much means that you just like things really clean and like you're like neat and stuff? Well, my answer to that would be not even close. You see, when you have OCD, you have these recurring thoughts that pop into your head called obsessions, and these can be very unsettling and disconcerting. But when I use the words unsettling and disconcerting, I don't want you to get the idea that they're like gross or deviant or something like that. Sometimes, for some people they can be, but they don't have to be. Really what I mean by unsettling and disconcerting is that they cause a lot of anxiety. They cause you to feel uncomfortable. And the thing that makes these obsessions are the person's inability to let go of these thoughts, to stop thinking and obsessing about these thoughts. For example, a person without OCD might go shopping in town and think to themselves, did I leave the light on at home? I can't remember. I might have, but I don't know. Well, I guess I'll find out when I get home. On the other hand, someone with OCD might be more inclined to think, did I remember to turn off the light in the kitchen before I left? I think I probably did, but I don't know. I really hope I didn't leave the light on. If I left it on, that would be a really big waste of electricity. I wonder how much it would actually cost if I forgot to turn off the light. I mean, I think I turned it off, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not remembering things right. I mean, there have been several other times when I've thought something was true, but it wasn't true. So maybe this is just one of those times. Maybe it actually is on. I don't know. There's no way to know. A person with OCD is much more likely to keep thinking about that light that they may or may not have turned off, even though it really isn't that big of a deal. But to them, they're just obsessing over it. Examples of other obsessions could be disturbing and intrusive sexual thoughts, or thoughts about religious matters like committing the unpardonable sin. An obsession could even just be a general sense that there's something off, that the world is not how it should be. I want to be clear, however, that just because you might have some of these thoughts on occasion does not mean that you have OCD or that you have obsessions. For people with OCD, these thoughts are constantly popping into their heads. And once they rear their ugly faces into the head of someone with OCD, they can be very hard to get out. This brings me to the C in OCD, compulsions. Compulsions are the habits or rituals that people with OCD use to try and combat the unsettling feelings their obsessions bring. Common compulsions include things like hand washing in response to an obsession about being clean, repeated checking to make sure that something is a certain way, like the example with the lights. Though these might provide temporary relief, they really only last until the next time the obsession hits. Technically, to have OCD doesn't even require that you have compulsions per se. There's a very common type of OCD which is referred to colloquially as pure O, which is just obsessions about things, even if you might not have any particular compulsion or ritual that you do in response to it. Personally, I would describe myself as having checking OCD. People who are so-called checkers hate uncertainty about particular things, and so they check to see if those things are the way they should be. Now, that doesn't mean that I obsess over every single bit of uncertainty. I don't know who's going to win the next football game, but I don't really see that as particularly important, so that's not really gonna faze me that much. Ultimately, my obsession is not so much a thing, a topic in particular that I obsess about. Rather, it's a way in which I can think about something. And if that's a little difficult to understand, here's an example from the semi-recent past. So a few months ago, I was dealing with some extreme anxiety that led me to have multiple anxiety attacks every single day. It was very bad. And if you don't know what an anxiety attack is, then I'll tell you in another video. Anyway, to help with this intense anxiety, I got a prescription for sertraline, aka Zoloft, which essentially increases the amount of serotonin in your body. So I was taking Zoloft for a few days, and on the third or fourth day, during the evening, I realized that I was sweating a lot. Like, way more than normal. I also knew that this thing called Serotonin Syndrome exists, which essentially is if you have too much serotonin in your system, really bad things can happen, and sometimes it can even be fatal. So the rational side of my brain said, dude, you were given a really low dosage. There's no way you can possibly be getting serotonin syndrome. But the obsessive part of my brain was like, well, I don't know. I guess maybe you could get serotonin syndrome. Maybe, like, I don't know. It's a possibility. Again, it's something that's semi-uncertain. Maybe you could get serotonin syndrome. And so I searched online for symptoms of serotonin syndrome, which is itself a reflection of that obsessive checking nature, because I couldn't let it go until I knew for sure that I did not have serotonin syndrome. Now keep in mind that during this, I was getting myself really worked up. I was anxious, so my heart was beating faster, and I was just getting really nervous about it all. So eventually, I found a list of the symptoms for serotonin syndrome, and noticed that some of the symptoms included things like agitation, restlessness, excessive sweating, rapid heart rate, and immediately I was just like, oh, I have those symptoms! Maybe I have serotonin syndrome! Even though my rational side knew, dude, you were literally given a prescription dosage that is 4 times less than what some other people regularly take. But nevertheless, my obsessive side won over, and needless to say, I pretty much worried myself to sleep that night. The next day, I was a bit better, even though I was still fairly anxious about the whole thing, if I could have serotonin syndrome or whatnot. But then it hit me. I've looked at all the symptoms of serotonin syndrome, but maybe something I could do is look up some of the side effects of Zoloft, because this is a new medication, and sometimes medications have side effects. So I found a list of side effects for Zoloft, and it just so happened that on the list was excessive sweating. And immediately I was just like, oh my gosh, I am such an idiot. I thought I had serotonin syndrome, and it was just a side effect of Zoloft. And everything else, I realized right there, okay, I was just getting myself worked up last night, and that's why I was agitated, and that's why I had a rapid heart rate, and all of that. And looking back, it just looked really stupid. But that's kind of the thing with OCD, is that when you're not obsessing about a certain thing, and you look back to a time when you were obsessing about a certain thing, you can really realize that, wow, that was stupid. I really had no reason to be worried about that whatsoever. But when you're going through it, it actually feels really serious. It was because of this constant obsession that, well, maybe it's serotonin syndrome. Maybe you don't know for sure that it's not serotonin syndrome. It's that sort of uncertainty about it that really caused me to obsess over it. My point with using this example was to show that my obsession doesn't manifest itself so much in a specific topic or a specific idea, but it's just a way of thinking about something. It's not like I'm obsessed with serotonin syndrome. That it's not like I just have thoughts that pop into my head about serotonin syndrome. It's that serotonin syndrome was the topic that my sort of obsessive nature latched onto and obsessed about. Now, the next day I could obsess about something else, or if I hadn't resolved that, maybe I would still be obsessing over it. But it's the process of thinking for me rather than the specific thing that I'm thinking about. This is kind of why I have a love-hate relationship with philosophy. Philosophy is my passion. I love it. But sometimes my excitement to learn and discover new things can sort of overstep its rightful boundaries and turn into an obsession where I feel like if I don't know the answers to these big questions, then something's wrong and that I need to figure them out. I'm become obsessed with them. So that's pretty much my experience with OCD. And just so that this video isn't a huge downer, I want to leave you guys with two things to keep in mind if you or someone you know has OCD. Just bits of advice that you can take and generally use. The first thing is something I never really even fully comprehended until just recently. It's that this constant feeling like something is wrong, like something needs to be changed somehow, the universe is just wrong, something is wrong. That is not reflective of any kind of objective, true reality. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times you get this feeling like something isn't right, but you assume that the reason you feel like something is wrong is because something is actually wrong. But this is a faulty assumption. This is not correct. That feeling like something isn't right just is the disorder. That's it. That's what the disorder does. It makes you feel like something's off, even when it really isn't off, even when it's fine. And I don't know about you, but when I realize this, it's like a ton of heavy weights are just lifted off of me. Like, things are actually okay. It's just the disorder, that's all. It's nothing real. There's no objective thing that's actually wrong. It's just the disorder. The second bit of advice is something that I originally got from my dad, but it's from Eastern philosophy. And it's that sometimes you just have to be like water and just go with the flow. Just go with the flow. Sometimes you're gonna feel anxious and uncomfortable, and that's just the fact of the matter. You'll feel anxious and uncomfortable sometimes. That's it. But when you do feel that way, don't try and wrestle with it and just beat yourself up and say, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I stop worrying? Oh, I hate this. This is horrible. I hate everything. There's no point in doing that. You're not going to beat anything by doing that except yourself. If you're anxious, let yourself be anxious. Don't get angry at yourself for having some worries or obsessions about something. In the right frame of mind, you can deal with these things and help your situation tremendously. So that is all I have for this video. I hope you're able to take away some good bits of information from what I've said that might be able to help you or someone you know with OCD or anxiety in general. So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.